Well, today's question is about retirement. What's your plans after you dedicate how many decades to a job, a career, a passion that you got going on? You're going to sit on the beach? You're going to sit on a comfort or, a easy chair and watch Duck Dynasty? Or you're going to be like me, man, Newton's Law, where I'm going to just keep on going until acted upon by an outside force? Well, today's guest and I think the same, and that's many reasons why I truly enjoyed my time with him. But we're going to get into all of that in just a few minutes, but I got a couple things I want to throw at you like I normally do. First and foremost, this is one of two types of podcasts I do. It's a long version, like most of the ones you see out there. It's up to 90 minutes long, and I have a guest or two on, and we talk, about fucking anything, everything and anything. And then opposite weeks, just me and this microphone and yelling at you for about 5 to 10 minutes what's on my heart and on my mind, or vice versa. But you get the point. I really enjoy doing those. And anything you want to know about the show, jump over to the website, Be Raw Podcast, and it'll direct you everything. I'll answer all your questions, and would love for you to follow me on social media, especially Instagram and YouTube. And you can do that, Be Raw Podcast on both those. Like, subscribe, share, all that crazy stuff, helps the show out a ton. And if you like what you hear, tell a friend or 7. And, of course, I can't go any further without hollering about my boys over at Live Rishi. These guys make high-quality CBD product, and the Rishi rub keeps my old-ass joints and muscles moving freely and comfortably, because I ask a ton for my body. I'm a self-proclaimed gym rat, amongst other things. Jump over these guys, liverishi.com. Use the code word TABLE50, and you're looking at 50% off your entire order. And showing you some love, for showing us some love. Thanks for that. All right, man, let's get on to this show. Today's guest, Mark. This guy spent many decades in the medical field, which he enjoyed. You'll hear about that. Also, when he retired, the guy kept the throttle down. Now he's a successful author and master beekeeper. He's got some crazy stories, a little bit about his books. Of course, he wants you to check them out, which I highly recommend. And then the stories around him becoming a beekeeper. Well, you know what? I'm going to let him tell you all about them. Let's get to it. We're going to start recording. Website, I do mine on Squarespace, and I manage it and stuff, of course. The amount of effort it takes to put in a website is crazy. Even though you build it, you put it up there. Well, now you got to update it and maintain it and, change the links. And whew. So I don't blame you a bit to have somebody do that for you.
Well, he's teaching me, but I'm just getting started.
Well, by the way it looks, dude, you got enough brain power to run a website.
Well, I hope so.
No, your bandwidth is probably, I guess bandwidth would be time, right? If that's what you want to spend your time doing, but it seems like you got a lot of other things going on that we'll get into. But
Good.
Yeah, again, man, thanks for coming on. Of course, everything now you say he's going to be on the internet. So that's my disclaimer. And so I was doing it when you reached out to me. I did a little research on you, and it's crazy how casually you're like run through your bio. Did you write your bio, or did you have somebody do it?
I wrote it. I have a marketing person that helps with editing it, but I wrote it pretty much. It blew my mind. I got like halfway through, and I was like, this guy's talking like he went down to the grocery store and got a gallon of milk and then stopped at the gas station to get some fuel and came home. That's how it just seems so casual. And to me, because I'm not used to that. I come from being a farmer and a blue collar background. Mm-hmm. So when I read your bio, it's just the dedication and the time that you put into that is very impressive to me. Yeah. So I would like you to spit that out in your own words.
My bio? You got it.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I grew up in a small town, pretty much a blue-collar town in New Hampshire. And my parents had a furniture store, and when I got big enough, I worked on the truck delivering furniture.
Oh, that's cool.
Christmas Eve was Lazy Boy Day, when everybody got their Lazy Boy for Christmas, and I was a truck with Lazy Boys on them. So I worked for them, and then left to go to college to be an engineer.
So wait a minute, though. Growing up on Christmas Day, you would have to deliver Lazy Boys?
Christmas Eve.
Christmas Eve?
Oh, yeah. And
that's incredible.
And I would, when I get back to the store, they had me wrapping stuff, and there was always somebody showing up wanting a rocking chair wrapped, or some crazy giant thing wrapped. And so they had great entertainment watching the kid try to wrap something like that. So,
but wait a minute? Did you wrap the chair not in a box, but like wrap the chair?
I have.
Yep. So if somebody looked at it, it was obviously a chair, but it was just covered in wrapping paper.
Yeah.
That's fucking great.
It's
like when you wrap a bike and you wrap it all up and it's obvious a bike, right?
Yeah. I did that on Christmas Eve and days up to Christmas. That was our big time. That was when we made, whether you make it or don't, if you're in business like that. So yeah. we worked hard, and Christmas Eve finally closed it down and got Christmas Day off, and
and right back at it.
First day off after a long, hard stretch from Thanksgiving to Christmas. So
now did back then, did tax season affect you guys? Like nowadays, like mattress places and furniture places just love tax season. To where people are getting their
all the details. I know we tried to sell a lot of stuff after that to get the inventory down. I think that was for tax reasons, but there was always a sale after Christmas, and but I don't know all the tax laws back then.
Yeah, like when people got their tax refund, they'd come and buy a chair from you.
Oh, I see what you mean, in the spring.
Yeah.
Okay. Probably not so much in a small town. People bought stuff when they needed it or when there was a sale, pretty much.
Right.
But I was small school. It was a regional school. I came from one of the towns that went to it. I think we graduated 160. It had a great trade education. I took woodworking and architectural drafting and mechanical drafting, along with French and physics and stuff like that, because I wanted to go to college and I wanted to be an engineer. In high school, I worked teaching swimming some. I scuba dived when I was in high school in the lakes in New Hampshire. Once scuba dived under the ice. That was exciting.
Oh, that's just fuck, dude, that's nuts.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm claustrophobic, so scuba diving just scares the hell out of me.
Mm-hmm.
And how long did you stay under the ice?
A tank would last 60 minutes tops, maybe. And so we probably didn't stay under more than 40 minutes or so.
You didn't get cold?
It was cold. We had a pretty good wetsuit. But,
right.
Wetsuit works by warming the water against your skin. And so when you first get in, it's really cold.
Yeah.
But when you're in New Hampshire, there's limited season for scuba diving if you're not willing to be adventurous. So
I was going to say the water even in June is probably cold.
Yeah. July's all right.
Yeah.
August it starts to get cold again.
Yeah, I was going to say for 2 weeks in July it's probably pretty good, but then other than that.
Yep.
So
I wanted to get out of West Lebanon, New Hampshire, and go somewhere else. So I went to Cornell and to be a structural engineer in the civil engineering school. Found that wasn't that turned on by it once I got into it, but I loved chemistry. So I switched over to chemical engineering, and then found out that if I was going to be a chemical engineer, I was probably going to be designing chemical plants and working for the petroleum industry and something like that. And I said, I'll do something else. So I started taking biology classes and figured, I thought, well, maybe I'll try to go to med school. And if I figured if I didn't get into med school, my background, I might go into use engineering to do pharmaceuticals or making alcohol, making
sure.
wine, beer, things like that. I learned stuff to do that. But I got into medical school. So I went and enjoyed that. I did.
Now the time first, I want to just make a joke. You were going to go the Breaking Bad scenario.
No. Although some of the classes, this is in the 70s, and in organic chemistry, when we'd be looking at the molecules, you'd say, I could probably build mescaline if I wanted to.
No problem.
Never did. I actually drew it up one time and showed it to the instructor, and he said, "Yeah, that would work," but I didn't do that. But I loved I loved organic chemistry. I mean, a lot of people in pre-med say, "Oh God, that's the worst course ever," but I thought it was really interesting and exciting.
What was so exciting about it, though? Like, if so many people are telling, is it the difficulty of it?
It's not an easy class if you don't have a good background in chemistry. And as a chemical engineer, I had a really good background in chemistry when I took organic.
Okay.
So it was more like just figuring out the rules and building molecules. And so that was, I thought it was kind of fun. And medical school was actually, I enjoyed most of it. There were some rotations that were really rugged. I did a surgical rotation in Hartford, Connecticut, in an inner city hospital, and we started at 4 a.m. and when we weren't on call, we finished at 9 or 10 p.m. and got up the next morning and did it again. And if we were on call, we worked most of the night in the emergency room. As a medical student, you didn't do the big stuff, but you sure got a lot of chance to sew people up. So they had us doing a lot of that kind of stuff, and just helping take care of their patients and scrubbing in the OR and doing that stuff. And
what year was that?
That was in the clinical year. Before we did basic sciences and then we did clinical.
So was that like in the 70s?
That was in the 70s. Yeah. I graduated
70s.
Med school in 77.
Okay.
But I enjoyed. I loved catching babies. Obstetrics was a lot of fun. The hospital where I did it, they didn't have any residents. They had just the staff doctors, and they just let us do everything. We caught a lot of babies. That was
you joke. That's awesome, and I laugh because when my son was born, the doctor physically had to catch him. Yep. Like he shot out, and the doctor was like, "Whoop! Whoa, okay, we got him."
Well, I caught one once in a lady in a wheelchair. They were reeling her down the hall, and I said, "Stop!" and reached down and pulled out a baby.
Oh, geez. That's you delivered a lot of babies?
Not a lot, but we delivered 1 or 2 a day usually while we were on the rotation, and sometimes it'd be more. But that was fun. Just med school was a chance to do a lot of stuff and have somebody looking over your shoulder the whole time, and then residency was tough. Back in the 70s. Nowadays, they do a lot better job of restricting the hours on trainees, so they're not, the walking dead while they're seeing patients.
Right, sure.
We would be on call every other to every third night, and when you were on call, sometimes you're up all night, and then you had to work the next day and take care of sick people, and so what they're doing now makes a lot more sense than that. But that was the way, that the docs that trained us had done it. And so
sure.
They figured that's sort of a rite of passage to work like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I did my fellowship was a lot easier, specializing in one area, lung disease and critical care. And, had people to work with, people to consult with, had residents that helped with the work, and did some research projects. I had a research model, a guinea pig asthma model. I gave asthma to little guinea pigs and then studied the airways.
Well, now, when you were doing lung disease, right?
Lung disease for my whole career. Yep.
Okay. So when you started that, were they still smoking in the hospital?
Wow. Let's see.
Because, like I see old TV shows and I hear people talking back in the day,
They were in some of the offices, I know, because I had patients would tell me that their docs would be smoking a cigarette and tell them to quit smoking.
That's amazing.
So I some of the older guard of the doctors, but
Sure.
I'm trying to remember if they allowed smoking in, I joined a practice after training in '83. Surgeon General's report had been out for quite a while. I suspect the hospital didn't allow it when I started because I don't remember people smoking in the hospital, but I sure remember them standing outside the front door smoking, some of the older doctors.
Yeah.
Some of whom I took care of later with lung disease.
Man.
Yeah. Lung cancer, emphysema, the bad stuff. People I'd worked with in the hospital. So that was tough. Did a lot of critical care in practice, which was hard. There are times we had residents, but sometimes we didn't. And when we didn't, that means we took call from home. And if somebody was unstable, you were answering calls or back in the hospital. And then the next day you had clinic and consults in the hospital. And so, there was some tough years. And then Duke recruited me to join their faculty. And when I did that, I got a lot of advantages. They help with managing, the business parts of my practice, and they also we were able to have residents and fellows that we worked with. And
now, before you joined Duke, did you have your own practice?
I did.
Was that like a brick and mortar, or did you have a practice within the hospital?
Both.
Oh, okay, cool. And then you specialized in lung disease,
pulmonary and critical care medicine.
Okay, so nowadays, if I go to my primary care physician and I got an issue with my lungs, you would be the guy he would send me to. Is that okay? Cool. All right.
If I wasn't retired.
Well, yeah, well, of course. But I'm saying back then, you're like the specialist. I wouldn't come to see you right away. My primary care would send me to you.
Yeah, if your primary care felt like your asthma was hard for him to control, or you had something he didn't understand, or you just wanted a consult to kind of review recommendations for how to go forward with your condition. Yeah, sure. I saw a lot of patients in the office as referrals. I followed some with that needed to have a pulmonologist follow them. Some patients with difficult asthma and other and emphysema, and I could go down a long list of pulmonary conditions.
Yeah, sure.
Might mean something, might not. But yeah, I saw a lot of airways disease, and there's a lot of different airways diseases, and that was one of the areas I focused on. Did procedures, did bronchoscopies, where we used a fiber optic instrument to go down and sample the lungs, including taking pieces out of the lung and putting needles in the lymph nodes that surrounded the airways, and did those things. Did right heart catheterizations, which is a pulmonary artery catheter. Use those for managing patients in the intensive care unit at times. Not done quite so much anymore. They had a flurry of excitement back in the 80s and into the 90s, and then they decided, well, maybe you don't learn as much from it as we thought we did, so we won't do it as much anymore.
So what's your thought on this? Always gets me, or I think about this a lot of times when somebody goes on a ventilator, or when they get what do they call that, a trach?
Right. Tracheostomy. Yep.
And they say that, is it the classic thing, a ventilator helps you breathe? Obviously it helps you breathe. So your body's like, I don't need to do that anymore. And your body just doesn't, kind of gives up. Is that a super simplified way of doing that? Saying that?
Usually you go on ventilators because your lungs are so impaired that it's difficult for your body to maintain your ventilation. It's struggling to keep your carbon dioxide down, keep your oxygen up. And so the ventilator assists that. It helps take some of the work off your breathing muscles. It helps expand a stiff lung. It helps deliver oxygen, extra oxygen that you can't otherwise deliver. So it's a temporizing measure, hopefully, until the lung can heal enough to support independent ventilation. So if it's going to be more than a short stay, then they often will replace the tube that goes down from the mouth into the airway with a tracheostomy.
Okay.
Just because then it's easier to take somebody on and off the ventilator to see when they're ready.
Okay.
And to give them periods of breathing on their own than it is with a tube that, is that long down into your windpipe. So
Have you put those in, taken those out, and did all that stuff? But since we're talking about babies and lungs, when my wife was pregnant with our son, we didn't know he was a boy. We waited till he was born, right? But
same with us. Yep.
What's that?
Same with us.
That's awesome.
Yep.
It was just fun. I'm like, huh? You got a boy? And I'm like, hey. But I listened to a podcast because I consume information much better audibly, right? And I'm on the road a lot, so that's how I consume a lot of my information. I am a huge fan of creaking open a book and smelling it and feeling it in my hand and falling asleep after I read about 4 pages. But so I'm listening to this podcast. It was called 40 Weeks, and it was about 10 minutes long. And what you did is once a week you listened to an episode, and it was telling you what was being developed with your kid, right? So this week it did this week it did that. And of course, everything was super fascinating to me. And 2 things stick out. One was, you probably know this, but their nose is hard as a rock for like 3 months when they're born. And that's so when they push up against the breast to feed, it doesn't smush their nose and cut off their airway.
I've forgotten that. I might have learned that in medical school, but
yeah, that's usually not something you think about all the time. But I was like, wow, just that's fascinating. Just these little things. But then the one when it was, I don't know, I don't remember the week, but it was close to being to his birth, and they said the biggest thing that happened this week is fluid was put around the air sacs in their lungs, because up until this, obviously they're underwater, basically, amniotic fluid. So this fluid was put in around the sacs in their lungs, so when they breathe air, they didn't stick together. So they're like, it lubricated the air sacs.
It's called surfactant.
Surfactant.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I thought that for some reason that stuck out to me. And I guess the other one was at conception, the eye color and hair color are determined right at conception. But until, I don't know how many weeks, 2-3 weeks, until the baby is born, the eyes are completely white and the hair is completely white. The color doesn't come in until like 3 weeks before they're born. That's what it said. That's what it said.
Well, it's interesting because premature babies, sometimes they got
the color, right?
Yeah, so that surprises me to hear that. So.
And I might have the timing off, like how long before they're born, right?
Okay.
But they said at conception and for the first X amount of time, that's white and white. And then we get a ultrasound, right? Our first ultrasound, I'm all happy. I'm going to go. It freaked me out, dude, because the lady, she's like, look at the screen. And I look up and it's like these big eyes and like this skeleton looking at me. And she's like, oh yeah. The fat and the fat will be grown in. She's like, it's so little right now. That's all you see is the skeleton. I'm like, that was a little weird. That was a little weird, but
yeah, the new ultrasound technology is pretty amazing.
Isn't that crazy? Like that 4D or 3D that they do where they like, oh my God, it's amazing. It's crazy. We didn't know, again, we didn't know his gender, but when we got that, I think it's a 4D thing, 3D or 4D image, all we could see was half his face and his nose. And he was like laying on his arm. I go, it's a boy. And my wife's like, yep, it's a boy.
We just by looking at him, we could tell it was a boy.
Yeah.
But that's interesting, man. That the medical stuff, the human body is incredible, right?
Yeah. Although I still look at medical journals that come to me, but honestly, I don't read it that as much as I did. I used to, when I was in practice, I would, read everything I could get my hands on, but or I had time for. But now I like to read fiction.
I like it. I like fiction.
I like fiction too. And I always liked fiction when I was working. If I had time to read something, like if I was on an airplane or something like that, and because it was an escape from the reality. Yeah. What
was your go-to back then?
Well, I read a lot of different things. Some highbrow, some less. One of my favorite ones, if I had to fly coast to coast, was Tony Hillerman. He wrote Skinwalkers and the Navajo Mysteries, because you could start one of his mysteries on the East Coast, and when you were touching down on the West Coast, you were reaching the end of the book. And
nice.
So I used to pack one or two of those. But I read all kinds of different stuff back then. Tom Robbins, Melville, even.
What do you read nowadays?
Anything I can get my hands on. Just read The Lincoln Highway by Amor Tolles. Cloud Cuckoo Nest by Anthony Doerr.
Oh, I know that one.
Mad Honey, Jodi Picoult, and I can't remember her co-author. There's a lot of good stuff out there right now.
So you put your nose in a book. You don't do Audible?
No, I don't do Audible. My mind tends to drift on Audible. When I bring it back to the book, it's a couple pages ahead. Mm-hmm. So I like either, like you said, a book in your hand, or I have Kindle on an iPad that I read sometimes. I've got, I don't know, a couple hundred books on there. So
back in the day, you're doing all this medical stuff, and then what's this thing about Russian? You speak Russian?
No, I took it in college. It was in the 70s, and there was a Cold War and all this stuff.
Okay, that makes sense.
And I'd say I was thinking about what kind of liberal course I wanted to take. As an engineer, you're only allowed a certain number of liberal arts courses, and I said, well, I'll learn a new language. And so I said, what new language do I want to learn? I'd done French in high school, and I said, well, I'll try Russian. So I did a year of Russian when I was in college. And it was pretty interesting, but I can't remember much of it.
I was going to say, can you at least find the bathroom if you land?
I don't plan to go to Russia, honestly, not these days.
I was going to say, that's not somewhere you want to be anywhere close to nowadays, right?
Yeah, now I'm studying Italian.
Very nice.
Because I became a dual citizen during the beginning of the pandemic. My grandfather came from the old country.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I qualified to become an Italian citizen. So I figured, well, if I ever wanted to live over there for any period of time, it would be handy to be a citizen. So I could do it. And it was something to see. I wanted to see if I could get it done. There's a lot of paperwork. You got to chase down a lot of records. You got to get these gold seals put on them. And then you got to send it you got to go to the consulate and then they send it all to Rome. And then one day you get an email that says you're an Italian citizen.
How long did that process take?
About a year and a half.
So
it takes a while to get an appointment at the consulate. I can tell you that.
Oh yeah, that was the longest thing that you had to wait for?
Well, I needed to get it to just find out what I needed to do. It's kind of on the line, but it's not well organized. So when I got there with what I had, he said, well, no, you also need this and this and this, and you need to do this and this with this. And you need to give me 300 euros and so I had to go. Where did I go to get? I'm trying to remember if I. Oh no, they had the dollar equivalent of 300 euros as the process, and
they wanted American money, huh?
Yeah, but it had to be exactly the right amount converted to.
Oh, phew.
So. You had to look up what the conversion rate was that day that you brought it.
Yeah, no kidding. It changes daily. So you physically had to go to the consulate?
In Philadelphia.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and I live in North Carolina, but our consulate is in Philadelphia. But it just so happened that my daughter-in-law and son were living in Philadelphia at the time, so it
Oh,
was
there you go.
very convenient. She was working at Penn and at the hospital there. She's a cardiologist, and so it was nice to visit them and go to the consulate. So been there a couple times. Went there to get my passport finally after I got my citizenship. So I have an Italian passport and an American one.
I was just going to say, when it flashed in my mind that, man, I wanted to say, once you get your citizenship, get that damn passport. Got a dual passport. That's not a bad thing.
No, I was excited about it. I don't know if I'll ever do anything with it, but I was excited about it.
It's cool to have. It's
Yeah.
it's like me having a CDL. I don't know if I'll ever do anything with it, but kind of nice to have. Speaking of, so your daughter is a heart doctor. Daughter-in-law. Heart doctor.
Yep.
I had a 5 years ago, maybe. I had a heart procedure.
Yeah. You told me you had the radio ablation. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good procedure. There's a lot of recent publications saying that it helps prevent complications later on. So it was a good idea.
Oh, I could imagine he's got older and things weren't working as right as you were younger. They'd probably cause a lot of issues, right?
Yeah, less chance of recurrence after the procedure than without it. So
yeah, it's like I said, about 5 years. I've been rock solid knock on wood, rock solid the whole time. But Italy. So you're just gonna, have you ever been there?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Rome is my favorite city in in Europe. I love Rome.
You a history buff?
Not terribly, but it's hard to not be when you're in Rome.
Not just gonna be
Right. The Colosseum and the Duomo and all the places where they raced chariots and things like that. It's just it's a really neat city, and the food is amazing.
Oh, imagine.
Oh boy.
Now, is that like street meat? Like, do you get that like on the street, or do they have like little carts that you go to and get like sandwiches and?
I don't remember much of that. It was mostly we just sit down at a table in a cafe on the sidewalk or in a piazza. I mean, that's where a lot of them were, around a piazza. So, yeah, that's probably where we ate most of our meals. But the weather was really good when we were there, which was helpful.
Yeah.
But, no, I enjoyed that a lot. I've been to a few countries in Europe, but not all of them. But I have to say I'd go back to Rome. Florence was nice, but my wife liked Florence better. I like Rome.
Oh, I want to go to Rome, but I'm always cautious that, they show pictures of the Colosseum, but they're like, hey, this is what it'll be like. But when I go there, there'll be 75 million people and you'll be jammed in there and you look up and you see the Colosseum, right?
There was almost nobody there when we were there.
Oh, that would be amazing.
Yeah, we just walked around. We might have seen, I don't know, a person here and there around a corner somewhere, but it felt like you just stand in the middle of this piece of history. It was.
Now, do you think that they filled that thing with water? What's your thought on that?
I don't remember anything about that. But now that you mention it, didn't they do that? Like, didn't I
Well, they said that, there's people that prove that they could fill it with water, for ships and have battles, and do all that. And then there's people that prove that it can't be filled with water. So I was just wondering if you knew about that and what your opinion was.
I think you know more about that than I do.
I'd love the history of Rome. That stuff. I even get into the ancient alien shit with Rome, to where stuff was the only way it could be built was with aliens, and that kind of thing. That's my bubblegum watch when I'm 9:30 at night and I've been up since 4 a.m. and I need a half an hour to wipe my mind clean of everything. I watch Ancient Aliens.
Well, there's some pretty amazing engineering that they accomplished thousands of years ago.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
I mean, just the manpower alone. I mean, you got to look at what they could do with manpower.
Yeah.
Yeah, amazing.
But now, so your dual citizenship,
Mhm.
you've spent 40 years almost in the medical field.
40 almost.
Yeah. And now you're a beekeeper.
Well, 40. I've been keeping bees for this is the 10th year that we've been
10
keeping
years?
bees. Yeah, yeah. That's another exciting hobby. You get in the middle of a hive of 60,000 bees, and you got to do stuff with them, and sometimes they're not happy about it, and it can get real loud, and your heart rate can start going up.
Yeah, I can imagine.
It's as exciting as some of the things I did in the intensive care unit sometimes. So, yeah, but it's really an interesting field. The bees make a lot of sense. They're a social insect. You know, they make decisions. I should say they make decisions.
Like, is a collective, right?
Their pheromones guide them into different actions, activities.
Well, I could say the same thing about me, and it got me in some trouble.
Well, everything they do is for the good of the hive. It's
Yeah.
for the survival of the hive. But they're pretty interesting. You can read a lot about it in my book, A Swarm in May. I put a lot of beekeeping knowledge into that book, so that and some of them related to what was going on in the people's lives.
Oh, okay. I see.
So,
Now, I want to back up just a minute. When you said it's really loud, so are you talking you got that white suit on and you're covered, and then the
Yeah.
bees come in and like cover you?
no, well, when you get in there, sometimes if you've been in there a while and you're doing stuff they're not happy about, or it's a time of year when they're not getting enough nectar flow from nutrition sources and things, and they're kind of cranky. They can have short tempers, so they can release their alarm pheromone quickly, which makes others release their alarm pheromone, and it just can build up quickly. So you can go into a hive and there's just this nice, quiet, gentle buzz, and the bees are just walking around, and something happens that they don't like you drop a frame or something like that, or you sometimes when you're taking them apart, they seal everything in something called propolis that helps seal them, and it also helps protect them from infections. It's antibacterial, antifungal. But if you take your tool and you have to separate the different levels, and they've stuck them all together, sometimes you got to pop when that happens. You try not to let that happen, but when that happens, sometimes that upsets them. But if you've been in there a while, like I remember one time I had a queen in one of my hives, and it was a big hive at a peak time of the year, and she had run out of sperm. It was to make a worker bee is a female. A queen needs sperm because they have to have two sets of chromosomes to make a queen. I mean, to make a worker or to make a queen. They're the females in the hive. The drones are males, and they only have one set of chromosomes. They're what we call haploid. And so if a queen runs out of sperm, all the eggs she lays make drones. And drones are pretty useless. The male bee in a hive, all it does is eat. It doesn't do any good for the hive. The reason there are drones is to go mate with virgin queens. And that's their whole purpose.
Well, okay, so when a hive is healthy, how much of it is a drone? How much of it is drones?
Depends on the time of year.
Okay.
It's probably 5 or 10% at the most.
Okay.
But one time I had a hive, I went in there and all there were drone cells. That was all the queen was laying. So I had to get rid of that queen, and I had to replace her, or else my hive was going to die.
Sure.
Because drones don't bring any food back to the hive. They don't do any of the work of the hive. They just eat. And
So how does the hive take care of that naturally? Like you physically go and remove the queen, right?
and bring in another one?
You go in and you pinch the queen. Yeah, we call it pinching.
Okay.
But and then you have another one ready. Hopefully, you pull one out, and then you have to wait 6 or 12 hours so her scent's gone.
Okay.
Because if you put a queen right away in there, they would say, "Well, that's not our queen," and they would try to kill her.
Okay.
But she comes in a cage, a little queen cage, and at one end of it there's a sugar plug, and you put her in there in the cage with a sugar plug on one end, and you watch to make sure they're not going to try to kill her, because they try to sting her through the cage and try to suffocate her and what we call ball her, which means they heat her up. They cover it and they generate heat to try to cook her, basically, if they don't like her. But if it looks like they're happy about her and you leave it in there, it'll take them 3 or 4 days to eat that sugar plug out, and then she'll come out and they'll be happy. So that's how you replace a queen.
Now, how do they do that naturally?
If a queen is failing, if there's a queen that's sick or it dies for one reason or another, they will take the youngest larvae, the eggs that have just turned into larvae that the queen has laid, and they will turn those into, they will make new queens from that. They will build out a larger cell out of beeswax, and they will feed that larva what's called royal jelly, and they will feed it to them until that cell is capped, and then before the larva goes through the metamorphosis to become a queen. But they'll make several of them just to
be safe,
to make sure. Yeah, fault tolerance basically. But the first one that comes out will make a sound. It'll make a sound called piping, or I'm sorry, yeah, is quacking and piping, and they'll make a sound, and then the other ones that are still in the cells will answer, and so the first one will go out, will find these other ones, and she'll kill them, because she's going to be the only one.
So she does the killing.
She pipes, and then they quack, and then she goes and kills them. Yeah. He doesn't always get all of them. So sometimes you get a few of them might make it, but then the nurse bees will get her up to strength, and then when she's strong enough, she'll go out on what are called mating flights.
Okay.
And she'll fly into what's called a drone congregation area. That's where all the drones hang out during the day. It's like a sports bar, kind of. and the queens will fly through there, and then the drones will grab onto them and mate them, and she'll get mated 12 to 20 times over several flights, and then she'll come back and she'll have a lifetime of sperm. That's her. After that, she's done. She stays unless the hive decides to swarm, and that's a whole nother story.
Right.
So she's back in there. So anyways, I come back to this queen I had to kill because she'd run out of sperm and was only laying drone. It took me an hour or two to find her because she didn't want to be found. And by the time I had found her, every bee in that hive was mad.
Yeah, sure. I can imagine that.
And they were trying to sting through genes and things like that. And it gets really loud. It sounds like a jet engine revving up almost when they get really loud like that. So that's probably one of the more exciting and stressful parts of beekeeping.
So you, through your medical stuff, and you've been involved, you love fiction.
Mm-hmm.
And then I imagine there is a scratch on you in you to write. Well,
I didn't expect to do much writing. I just, when I was getting ready to retire from medicine, you don't go from 100 miles an hour to zero and just stop. And so I had lined up all these classes I wanted to take. And we have a Osher Lifetime Learning Institute at Duke, and where a lot of people can take classes, and most of them are retired people that take the classes. And you can take one in almost anything you want if somebody's willing to teach it. And I took a class on writing novels, and I started to write, and then I took another class on it, and another one, and just decided I was going to write a book.
Now, so now you want to write a book. Did you have interest in bees at this point?
Yeah, I've been beekeeping since 2013. I retired in 2017.
Okay. So I'm wondering where the connection of having bees in your book came from.
Yeah. Well, my first book doesn't have bees in it. My first book is set in an earlier time, and it's the the protagonist is younger, and A Swarm in May was the first one I published. The first one I wrote sat in the drawer for a while because I wasn't happy with it. And then when I published A Swarm in May, and I thought that went well, I decided to get the other one out and work on it and work on it and work on it. And my editor said, she looked at it and said, yeah, you need to publish this. And so I did. And then I wrote the third book, which is the sequel to A Swarm in May.
I was just going to say, so the second and third book go together?
The first book I published was A Swarm in May, and it's in the middle. The first book I wrote was the prequel to A Swarm in May.
Okay.
And
Cool.
It's called Breath and Mercy, and it's a different themes, more like end of life themes. When is it the end of life for somebody? Basically, it was kind of a much heavier book. The kind you might write after you've had a career and those kinds of things.
I was just going to ask you, I imagine your career had quite a bit of influence on that one, right?
Yeah, some things that felt like you wanted to kind of get out after after 40 years of doing that stuff. So it's a little darker. It's not as fun to read. A Swarm in May can, it has its moments, but it's probably a fun read. I think it would make a really good movie or series or something like that.
You like that one, huh?
Yeah, one of the guys I gave it to for an endorsement said and it's on the back cover of the book, that he picked it up one night at 9:30, figured he'd start it and just see what it was like before bedtime, and he finished it at 3:30 in the morning. So I was hoping it would grab people and keep them interested.
Yeah, when somebody tells you that, that's good business, right? You like to hear that.
I was excited. I put his endorsement on the back cover. I thought that was a good endorsement for it.
Yeah. Now, for people that want to grab it and aren't really into the book, like what I'm saying, if they like X book, they would like this kind of book. Something that's like super popular, maybe like Lee Child's or something like that type of reading. Can you give like an example? So people are like,
you've seen Where the Crawdads Sing?
I haven't seen it.
Okay, well it's a book it was a bestseller book for a couple of years on the Times
and they made it
list, and they made a movie out of it, which I just watched a couple of weeks ago for the first time. And my editor said that she thought A Swarm in May was that kind of a book, that it was something that people who like crawdads would like my book, and that it was a book, the kind of book that book clubs would like. And I've actually I did a book club a couple months ago that was in New Orleans by Zoom. So it was a lot of fun. It was a bunch of nurses, various ages down there, that were in a book club, and they all read it. And then one of them reached out to me and asked if I'd be willing to do a Zoom meeting with them for their book club.
Man, that's cool.
And, it was a lot of fun, but they were eating some seriously good food in New Orleans, and I couldn't get any of that. So, but I was watching them eat while we were talking. But they were a lot of fun. They had a lot of good questions, and it was a lot of fun. One of them made a comment about Swarm in May. They said what she liked about the most was that I didn't describe the furniture. And what she meant was I didn't spend a lot of time talking about the drapes and the furniture and the carpet. It was a lot of just plot and action and people's reactions, what's going on inside of them, and it wasn't so much trying to make a flowery or describe the setting. You have to do enough setting, but I think sometimes you can read authors that say enough already. That's enough on the setting. So
no, 100%. Like when I listen, and obviously I read them as well. And I just read my last book I read was from another guest that was on, and it's a thriller and kind of a spoiler alert, but the guy can see into the future for like 10 seconds. And it's like, is that a curse
or is that a good thing? You know, by the end of the thing, I came up with my own conclusion. But it was an amazing read. And it sounds like you do this. He did the same thing you did, where I read other books or listen to the other books, and it seems like 10 minutes for them to describe the car they're driving or the room that they walked into, or they're walking into this neighborhood and they just describe the shit out of it. And you're like, okay, yeah, get to the point.
Yeah.
So,
well, that's what this nurse said. And the way she said it was, you didn't spend a lot of time on the furniture.
I like that. I like that. I'm going to write that down there. So now you got 3 books out, Amazon, of course, right?
Amazon,
on your website.
Barnes and Noble.
Barnes and Noble. Nice. Very nice.
Yeah. Bookshop.org. It's on those. It's been in a couple of stores. It's in some of the libraries around here. I'd like to get into more libraries. I'd like to get into more bookstores. But, you know, unless you're with one of the big publishing houses, it's hard to do that. So
Sure.
So any help spreading the word from your listeners, from you, from anybody, from the woman out on the street next door walking her dog, you know, all that help is appreciated.
Yeah, no, I'll definitely take a read, and we discuss that. We'll talk about that after, but I'll take a read. I'll do everything I can to help you out.
Thank you.
I know how much it is, especially now. There's just so much noise out there, you know, to get into somebody's ear. And I was talking to a fellow podcaster today, and he's like, all these podcasts out there. I go, dude, you're not even competing with just podcasts. You're competing with Audible books, the radio, music, sports radio. You're competing for ears, not podcasts. And same with you. You know, there's just a lot of noise that now, you know what, 20 years ago, you had to go through a publisher, right? So they could control the amount of stuff coming out, like with the music and TV and everything now distribution's free. So there's just so much out there. It's crazy, man. It's crazy. But, I wanted to ask you, you a magician too?
No, not really. That was one of the classes I took, though.
That's okay.
I have a grandson that's just getting old enough now that I can start to do some of the tricks I learned in a course called Magic for Grandparents. And there were some pretty good tricks in there. Got to see how things were done. And it takes a lot of practice, though, to be able to keep doing those things. I mean, you got to really practice the skills. And I haven't done it because it was a few years ago. I haven't practiced them, but my daughter-in-law is trying to shame me into relearning them because she wants me to do them at his next birthday party. So
no pressure.
Act is anywhere near that, but I don't know. I should get them back out and start working on them. So I'm glad you reminded me of that.
I love magic. I'm a huge fan of magic, and I'm one of those guys that I don't care how it's done. Just make me go, ooh, that was cool. That's all. Next. And I got a couple buddies that are magicians full time for 30 plus years.
Mm-hmm. Well, the guys that taught this class, they were in their probably late 70s, and what they had done for years was to go to kids' hospitals and do magic for the kids, and they were really good at it, and it really was heartwarming to hear their stories, and it's one of the, I think of the people that started in that class, I think every person finished it. And the last day we had to do a little performance. That was our graduation, and I did one where the grapes went from outside of a cup to inside of a cup. And 1, 2, 3, then 4. Oh, and that
gone.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So nowadays you are relaxing. You keep writing?
I have a 4th book.
Okay.
I'm workshopping the 4th one right now. probably working on the third draft right now. I've had 3 beta readers look at it, who are experts in different things I touched on in the book to make sure I got those things right. It'll hopefully come out in 2023. It'll be the last book in the series.
Okay. I was going to say, does that go with the series?
It goes with the series. It'll be
Awesome.
the 4th and last.
And then long term, you got more ideas rolling around your dome?
Not well formed. My wife and I have been talking about an idea. Well, she and I volunteer as forest stewards in a big forest that's near us. We help monitor the trails and things like that.
Oh, that's cool.
And trying to make sure people don't do anything crazy on there they're not supposed to do and such, because it's not a public forest. It belongs to Duke University, and they use it as a lab for their forestry department, but they have 7,000 acres and they let people use the trails. So we walk around and just try to remind people to be good citizens and to tell them stuff about the forest that's in there. And so I had thought the idea that we came up with was a forest steward who actually gets a little obsessed with his job and starts taking it beyond the job description a bit. But I got to figure out some ideas for where that goes.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm starting to think about the character, the main character for it. But that's going to be at the earliest late in the year that I would even think about putting anything down on that. I've started making a few notes, but not writing anything yet.
Now, do you have a specific? Some of my comedian friends and some of my podcasting friends, they dedicate, I don't do this, but they dedicate certain amount of time each day or each other, whatever day, whatever their schedule is. And they're like, I don't care what it is, for an hour, I'm setting a timer and I'm writing. I don't care what it is. Even if I put down 4,000 words and it don't mean anything, I just need to write. Do you do something like that?
I'm not going to say that it's every day, but it's most of my days. I get up in the morning, look at the paper, see what's happened. I like to do a little bit of mental gymnastics with the puzzles in the paper.
Nice.
The word jumbles and things like that, and try to figure those out. And then I sit down. I've got a lazy boy. And
it's all coming back around.
It's in my library, and my library has a window that looks down over the pond in front of our house, and where we have koi and other stuff, and a waterfall, and I sit up there and I try to write for 2 hours.
Ooh.
Sometimes 3. Sometimes it's not actually so much writing as it is editing and rewriting. Which is not as much fun, but anytime you get a sentence or a paragraph or whatever that you're really satisfied with, it's a good feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I do is when I am horrible at writing, but I find a lot of joy in it.
Mm-hmm.
So what I've been doing is getting on my website, I just put really small blogs, right? Only 3-4 paragraphs, right? But what I do is I just data dump. I don't even look up. I just type along and type my thoughts. And when I look up, Grammarly looks like it just puked all over my screen. Because I just, the punctuation, right? But I can't edit as I write. I mean, are you like that? Do you just put all your stuff down, then you got to obviously go back and edit? But you don't try to edit while you're writing, do you?
Well, the first time you put a sentence down, you try to do the best sentence you can, but then you go back and you say, well, maybe this clause should be at the first part of the sentence instead of at the end of the sentence, or I don't like this verb as well, or this adjective. There's some authors that say you should avoid adverbs, because if you're using an adverb, that means you had a lousy verb to start with. You should have come up with a better verb, and then you wouldn't need an adverb. And so if I have to use an adverb, I think, let me look at that verb again. So, I mean, there are things like that.
All right.
Sometimes you find yourself using the same word a couple of times in a paragraph, and you go, no, you don't want to do that. We call that a word echo. And most of the time that doesn't work unless you're specifically mean to emphasize that word.
Oh, I am so guilty of that. Ah, damn, dude. I am so word echo. That's gonna stick in my head now. I'm so guilty of that. But like you said, though, if you want to emphasize the word,
yeah.
But see, I looked at it as a negative to where I'm using it as a filler word.
Oh.
Right?
Well, if you're doing a blog, you might enjoy reading some of the things about writing style, because the craft of writing is really a craft.
Absolutely.
I just read a book by George Saunders called "A Swim in a Pond in the Rain," and he's a New York Times bestseller who's won all kinds of book awards and stuff like that. And he's been teaching creative writing for his whole career. He teaches at Syracuse, and he has a Master of Fine Arts program that he runs there. And so he just wrote this book about how to write. And I just finished reading it. And in it, he looks at 5 different Russian author short stories, and he analyzes these stories that he thinks are just masterpieces, and just takes them all apart. And he talks about different ways to write something. And so, anyways, there are a lot of books like that out there that I think can help you style. And it's still a work in progress for me, but it will be for the rest of my life.
Yeah, for sure.
Nobody ever gets to a point where they're perfect with it, where they can't get better. So,
yeah, if they're able to check their ego, they understand that they can always get better, right?
Yep.
Damn, Mark, always a pleasure, dude. I am so happy that we got reconnected.
Are we at the end of the hour?
We're at the end of the hour, man.
Wow.
Hey, man, I'll go all damn night with you because I still have 1,000 questions, but my idea was to have you back on, especially when your other book comes. I would love to pick your brain for quite a while about beekeeping.
Sure. Well,
because I just think that the overall reach and the overall effect that bees have on just about everything, you could talk about that, as you could talk about that for hours, right? But
yeah, my wife says to people, if we're at a party, says, don't ask him about beekeeping.
Oh, very nice. Yeah, well, that's it. Yeah. I'd be like, well,
but she's a beekeeper too. She's a certified beekeeper. Yeah, she
tells people not. She just don't want to talk about it.
Well, she just doesn't want me to just go crazy with the conversation on bees. Sometimes I get worked up about it or excited about it. She has 3 hives out in our yard right now. So
that's amazing. I think that's amazing. And then your overall bio. I mean, the medical field, the being a specialist in the lung, dipping your toes in everything. Russian. Now you're a dual citizen. You're an author, dude, man. Nice. Well done, sir. Well done.
There's a lot out there to do. And
absolutely.
Yeah.
Everything's interesting.
When I got towards retirement, I felt like I was a kid in a candy store. There was just so much out there that I never had time to do. There's so many parts of my brain I hadn't explored.
Oh my God, dude. See, I love your attitude about that stuff. And even in your, of course I troll you, right, to get some information. And, the remarks that you make about exploring your brain, and keeping it active. When my mom was still alive, for years, she would sit and do Sudoku, right? Yeah. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. But she's like, I feel good. And she would read a book a day. Like she would rip through she'd be like that guy that you have on the cover. Mm-hmm. She would rip through that in a day and be like, she'd hand it to me and it'd take me 4 months to read it because it's just, timing.
Good for
her. She loved reading. And I think that's where I got my passion. We shared passion of reading. She would read books and then she would pass them on to me. And then I would
donate them to a local library or to pass them on to somebody else that enjoyed reading them. There's just something about sitting there with a real book.
Mm-hmm.
I just, even with a Kindle, I tried reading with a Kindle and like off my phone. I like the smell and the sound a book makes when you creak it open.
But when you create your own image of what you're reading in your brain rather than what's on a television screen or something like that, I think it's just so much richer.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. And then have you ever, well, let me get the combination right. So you watch something on TV and then you read the book. Have you ever done that?
I'm trying to remember if I ever have.
Because then when you're reading it into the voice of the character that is on the book, on the TV. You know what I mean?
So there's a book that came out a year or two ago called Station 11. It's interesting. They wrote it before the pandemic started, and then it was about a virus that wiped out most of the population of the earth. But they did a TV show as a series on it, and it was quite different actually than the book. So I was reading it and watching the TV at the same time on that. That's one of the few I can think of. But
okay,
it's a good read. I recommend it.
Station 11.
I think if I remember that's the name.
Does it fall under the post-apocalyptic type?
Probably.
Yeah, with wiping out humanity and everything, right? But yeah, reading's just, I think it's a lost art. There's a challenge that I did for one. I would do it once a year for many years, and part of the challenge is you had to read 10 pages of a book each day, and it was for the challenge. It was a nonfiction or a fiction. You had to read, a business book or a self-help book of some kind, or like a autobiography of somebody. Hey, I got the shit kicked out of me for years, but look, now I'm successful kind of book. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So when you were in high school, the first English classes I took were like having to read Edgar Allan Poe or something like that, and then the teacher tearing it apart, and then I had a teacher, Mrs. Clements. I still remember it. That she was from Texas. I lived in New Hampshire, so she had a great accent. For 9 weeks, she just gave us a list of books. It was a really long list, and she said, "I want you to read any book that's on this list, and come talk to me about it."
And she gave you 9 weeks to read it?
No, it was as many books as we wanted off the list, and then come talk to her about it. And the more books you read, the higher your grade was. And so, but it wasn't like you had to write an essay or a paper or anything like that. You just had to talk with her about it to show her that you actually read it. And that was when I read a lot of books, and the more books in 9 weeks than I'd ever read in my life. And I said, "Hey, I like reading." So
well, yeah, but did the knowing that you're going to have a conversation after with somebody that shares the same passion about it, did that drive you to read more?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. She definitely fed your excitement about it. I mean,
yeah, sure.
It was a wonderful. It was a different 9 weeks than I'd ever had in high school, and I think it's probably why I like to read. And so, if Mrs. Clements ever hears this podcast, I'd like her to know that I'm eternally grateful to her.
That's awesome. But that's the same theory as of a book club, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Except you didn't have to sit and listen to somebody lecture, for an hour. I mean, that's different than a book club, obviously, but it was different than the English class I'd ever taken before. So
sure. But like a book club, being the theory is, I want to get through this because I want to be able to discuss it in an intelligent manner and know what the hell I'm talking about. Right.
That's a book club in a nutshell.
Yeah. Now, are you part of a book club now?
I am. Yeah.
Wait a minute. How many?
Well, I was in two. One of them seems to have kind of fizzled.
Oh, okay. All right.
The other one's been going. I haven't been in it for 30 years, but it's been going for 30 years. They guy that was 95 years old just said, "I can't do it anymore," and so they recruited some new faces, and I got into this book. Very a book club that hadn't changed members much over the long time. So they had to wait for somebody to retire from it, basically.
Yeah, like those old jobs where somebody's got to die before you get in it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. These guys are still alive, but they were no longer able to drive to the meetings and things like that. So they finally retired from it.
And doing that kind of stuff on Zoom is just not,
Yeah.
you know.
We were doing it with Zoom during the pandemic early on, but it's gone back to in person. Had a meeting last night. We talked about Lincoln Highway by Amber Tolles, which one of the books I mentioned earlier. So it's fresh in my mind. But yeah, it's a fun group. They call themselves the Reds Book Club, which stands for Read, Eat, Drink, and Socialize. And so everybody, there's a meal afterwards. Whoever hosts it picks the book and then makes a meal for you.
So like they said, okay, now do you get a certain amount of time? So here's the book, and on this date we're going to meet at my house, and I host a dinner and we talk about it.
Yep.
That's awesome. That's cool. Yeah, I don't. Well, I do that, but I play poker.
Oh, yeah. I used to play poker when I was in the resident.
Oh yeah, did you clean up? No. You donated?
I think I came out about even.
All right. Yeah. Obviously growing up, I played, the old school games, as we call them. But then when Hold'em got real popular, guy took me under his wing and like really showed me how to play, like really play how to do it. He was a semi-professional.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing he taught me was keep a P&L of your money, because that way, numbers are numbers, right?
Mm-hmm.
And since 2008, I've kept a P&L of my poker.
And
in the black. I'm in the black. I won't tell you how much I'm in the black, but I'm in the black.
Well, that's an achievement. Yeah.
Oh, it's been in the red quite a bit, but I bring it back up, and obviously through things change in your life and all that. But I used to play crazy amount. Nowadays, the reason I brought it up is nowadays it's mostly social, going, hang out with the guys and a couple ladies that play too. But I'm part of a couple groups that we meet once a month, so 2-3 times a month I'm in different groups, and it's kind of the same theory as a book club, right? You're sharing the same interest. Mm-hmm. You sit down and you're completing something, and you're enjoying good conversation. So
my dad had a regular poker group when I was a kid, and I grew up playing poker because my cousins all played poker, and every time we get together, we play.
It's a good way to occupy yourself so if you're not comfortable bringing up conversation, either you're sitting on the couch watching football, or let's all sit around a table and play cards, but it occupies your hands and your mind a little bit, and then you get into a social situation. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
People
just got to be careful about going over the edge with it. And as anything that involves gambling, you got to set your limits, I think.
I've seen, Mark, so I got to tell you this story. It's incredible. I play poker. I don't consider it gambling.
Mm-hmm.
We can talk about that, but I don't consider it gambling. Because anyway, so I like to play. Again, we travel a lot. It takes me to places I've never would go, because I'm like, hey, there's a game over here. I go over here. And then the people I've played cards literally all over the world. And it's just a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
And we were in California, and my wife's dad he passed since then, but he lived in San Francisco.
Mm-hmm.
And we were the city right next to it. I can't remember, little city next to San Francisco. And my wife goes, hey, there used to be this little card house called Artichoke Joe's. I'm like, wow, I gotta put that one in my resume. Hey, man, I went to Artichoke Joe's. It was a card house. So we go over there, and they since built it up, and it was like a casino, like a legitimate casino. So I walk in, and I sit down at a table. And I won't go into the details, but these people were straight up gambling. the way they were playing. And like I sit down, I like to get comfortable and hang out because I usually play for 4 or 5 hours at a time.
Wow.
And these guys, it was, Mark, it was like playing a slot machine, right?
Mhm.
Just the way they were gambling and chasing and just throwing money around. And I'm like, this is not for me. I'll burn through my $100 and call it experience. And I got my little chip for a souvenir. I got a little bucket, put all my chips in. But this guy to my right was huffing and puffing, and he was taking too long, according to the guy on my left. And they got in a heated argument in a different language, and I don't know what language it was. So the guy on my right stood up, the guy on my left stood up and fucking punched him right in the nose. Hit him like 3 times before they got scooped away, and I was like, what the over a $100 poker game?
Wow.
Are you kidding me? And I was like, this is why I like to travel and play, because I get to see shit like this, right? So then the guy sits next to me. They fill the seat instantly, right?
Mm-hmm.
Guy sits down, and about half hour in, I'm almost out of chips because I'm just getting rid of them. I just want to, I'm just going to leave. And I go, yeah, this is a lot of fun because I actually won a hand. And he goes, yeah, for you, you're not trying to pay the rent. And I was like, I'm out of here. I just scooped up my chips and walked away. I'm like, oh my God, dude, you're sitting at $100 game. For people that know, it was a 1-3 limit, 100, and I had $100 invested, and you're trying to pay the rent? Dude, you have problems. And then when I was playing bigger games like in Vegas, you always heard the stories, and the people just, they're chasing it, and I'm like, dude, you can't do that, man. Yeah, I mean, but that's them. That's on them. That they had whatever's going on. I can't judge them. That's what they did. But I've seen poker destroy a lot of people because they just can't handle it. But I think the P&L sheet has a lot to do with me because I'm like, I just don't have the money. If I don't have like a separate bank account for it, but if I look at my P&L, if I got $50, well, I got $50 to play with. And if that's gone, then it's gone. And then what I do is slowly build it back up by just feeding it a little bit, just, financially, but not much at a time, like $5, $6, $10 at a time. And the way I do that is if we go somewhere and I spend $5.73, the change I get from that $10, I put into my poker fund. So as you can imagine, to play in a $1,500 buy-in, it takes a long time to.
Yeah.
But I did nail one for a lot of money back in the day. So that fed me for a very, 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 very long time. But what it is, poker, socialization, right? Anything to get along with people and have a chat. Kind of like what we're doing now.
It's they say that if you don't have a good social life, your mind starts to go faster. That people who don't have a lot of contacts have more chance of dementia.
Really? That's it.
Yeah.
I totally get that. And I can really see how that would be true, but I've never heard, I haven't heard that put like that. Wow. That makes sense though. So, hey dude, if that's the truth, I'm going to live forever.
There you go. Yeah.
Hey Mark, where can everybody find you, man? Where's the best place to find you? Your website?
Anthonypowers.com. MarkAnthonyPowers.com.
Nothing on social media?
Oh, I'm on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter.
I didn't see an Instagram link on your website. Did I not?
Oh, maybe it's not on my website. That was I just did
well,
that.
What I'll do is I'll put your Instagram link obviously in the show notes. Is that the best place?
Sure.
Most of my audience is going to land on your Instagram.
Okay. I got to start posting more on Instagram. I post some on there. I post a fair bit on Twitter and a lot on LinkedIn. I have more contacts on those. So.
Yeah, Twitter. I'm not on Twitter. My bandwidth is getting a little thin, and I'd rather put instead of going real thin, I'd rather go kind of thin on a lot of things instead of really, really thin on more things. So that's my attitude. But all right, yeah, I'll put that in website and Instagram. And obviously, you said what, Barnes and Noble and Amazon would be.
Yep.
Is that the easiest and quickest way to get it? Amazon?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And
And please leave me some nice reviews too. Reviews help. Yeah.
Yeah. Me too. But I was going to ask you, any future plans to make an Audible book put it on audio?
I would love to do that. I'm trying to keep a P&L on my writing work too, and I think if we get it up enough that we can pay for that, we'd probably do that.
Yeah, but don't somebody like obviously I'm going to say Audible because it's the biggest one. I know there's a million other ones, but don't they have a deal where they like spot it for you?
I haven't seen that. If you see that, please let me know.
Okay. All right. Yeah, absolutely. Because I talk to a lot of my guests that come on are authors as well. And if I see that they got a connection of some kind where, they cover you, and then give you a kickback on the end side or something, I don't know how that would work.
Because I know that, the people that do the reading, I mean, you can read your own book and do that. But there are a lot of them are done by people that do it professionally.
Yeah.
And they get paid for it. So
see what happens there, right? In studio time and all that good stuff. Mark, again, pleasure, buddy.
Well,
thanks for coming on, and definitely going to have you back on. Hit me up when your book launches. We'll come on and we'll talk about bees and some other stuff, but that way we can pump your book a little.
Sounds good.
All right, buddy. Hang on just a second, but we're going to kill this recording. Thanks, bud. See that? Time with Mark, it's time well spent, and my life is much richer having spent some time with Mark, and I look forward to doing it again. As you heard, we will connect shortly in the future, but get a hold of him, man. Link is in the show notes. I would bet you he would love to hear from you to continue any type of conversation around what he has going on. All right, man, I'm going to get you out of here because I know you got shit to do, but don't forget, Live Rishi. Love these guys. Love the product. They keep my old ass joints working smooth. LiveRishi.com. Use the code word table50. Looking at 50% off your entire order. Everything you need to know about the show, BeRawPodcast.com. And would love for you to connect with me on social media and YouTube, and that's Be Raw Podcast. Like, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. It helps the show out a ton. And I'm hailing you from the home state of the boss. You know you made it when they name a rest area after you on the Garden State Parkway. Of course, I'm talking about Bruce Springsteen from New Jersey. All right, man. Don't act cool. Be cool. Till next time.